1907. She came to the Lower East Side of New York, and Dad came in 08 or 09 to Boston. And they met many years later, but I'm pure Ukrainian, which is kind of interesting.
So talk a little bit about your mom and dad. It's a great intro to the Alan Peck story.
Yeah.
You started it here, but give me a little more detail about your dad's beginning.
My dad was born in Zborov, S-Y-Z or S-Z-B-O-R-O-G-H, something like that, in Ukraine, which was a small peasant community just a few miles north of Kiev. Mother was born in Kaluz, K-A-L-U-S-Z, another small community just south of Kiev. They, due to probably the history of pogroms, Russians would come through, still doing it, aren't they? Mm-hmm. The Russians would come through and wipe out these villages, so there was a tremendous immigration of people, particularly Jewish people, from that area to the United States. And Dad got here in 07 or 08. He was about 8 or 9 years old, and they wound up in Boston Harbor. My mother came she thought it was 08. It turned out to be 07. She was 2 months old and wound up in the tenements of the Lower East Side of New York. Dad had two sisters, one older, one younger. His father just could not manage the new world, so he basically locked himself in a back room. His mother just dedicated herself to Dad, and what Dad did, he went into the streets of Boston as an 8 or 9-year-old selling newspapers all night. And the mother would go and try to rescue him, and he has stories how he stepped over the streetcar and landed on a $10 bill. He has all those stories, but never talked much about it. He apparently went through high school, eventually went to the Bentley School of Accounting, which didn't have a diploma in those days, but he wound up in the streets of Boston, selling those newspapers. And then he apparently got into the trade of, in those days, Liberty Magazine or Literary Digest or Look Magazine, or like they actually had boy sales. So he eventually started to work as a distributor, going around selling them to the various cities. He also had and then eventually he had a very good friend by the name of S.O. Shapiro, Shap Shapiro, who came from nothing in Chicago, the youngest of 8 immigrant children, but he became eventually a vice president of Look Magazine. So Dad always had a comfort zone with Shap. And in the Great Depression, he was literally taking care of his mother, his father, who wouldn't come out of one night, if he came home from school, from selling the newspapers at 3 in the morning and start to study, the father would come in and say, "You're wasting electricity," and pull the plug. So he grew up a bit angry about all that. But he became dedicated to his mother. He had 2 sisters, both married kind of ne'er-do-well, each had a child. And here he was going around selling these Literary Digest magazines and supporting all these people. In the Great Depression, we have one of his tax forms that he made $4,000 in 1930, and I still have that. But then they went bankrupt. And once again, he was still supporting these people, and started working for a company called Literary Digest. The same thing happened. So he was a Depression baby who could make a buck, but also saw that and never got away from that. And eventually, his friend Shap, I don't know how he met him, started moving up in Look Magazine, and got him a distributorship in Columbus, Ohio. They lived what had happened, he met my mother. They fell in love. He was a traveling salesman at this time, lost all his money gambling on a train, and it went to pick her up, and he wanted to cash a check. Her father wanted her to marry the house painter next door, not the traveling salesman. And although she had a brother, the brother was told, "Do not cash that check." Anyway, so the father was somewhat of a self-made zealot. On a Friday night, you did not eat dinner until he decided to come home, which could be midnight. And that night, my father was in town, took Mother to a Broadway play. Father came home. She wasn't there. He went crazy, cut her out of the picture. They eloped and went to Chicago, where he was then living, apparently. And she came back a year later to prove she wasn't pregnant. That was very big in those days. And then from Chicago, he eventually went to, they found him this little distributorship in Columbus, Ohio. One of the big guy that owned it wasn't doing a good job with the McFadden publications, McCall's, Ladies' Home Journal. So they stole it from them, gave it to Dad, and he just tried to make a living there. But if they put their magazines down, the distributor would come in and cover the magazines. So they couldn't make a go of it. They had a neat house, though. It's now in one of the better areas of Columbus. It's become the in place. But then it was, but they lived well. He loved football. He loved Ohio State. He loved Ohio State so well that when they were playing Michigan, he drove up there to the Michigan-Ohio State game. He got excited, came back on the train, forgot that he had left his car, which I can see it happening.
That is funny. That is really funny.
Okay. He was a character. There's no question about it. But what happened, Columbus just wasn't working out, and they found there was a distributorship in Jamestown called
Is it Empire?
Empire News Company. And that was part of a chain, and they went bankrupt, so Shap was able to connect Dad, and Dad bought that in 1942. When I was born. Mother was having me in Columbus. He was in Jamestown, my older brother. In those days, they wouldn't let a woman out of the hospital until the father came and signed, so she had to be there for a month. Then they moved to Jamestown. And he apparently, a building was supposed to be part of that contract, and it fell through, and that threw him. He had a hard time with that. But he wound up, and of course, Chautauqua was there, and he wound up distributing all the newspapers and magazines to Chautauqua. And we had two older brothers, Gerald, who was 10 years older, Myron, who was 4.5 years older. And when you lived in Jamestown, you worked for your father, whether you wanted to or not. Okay. And so he made that work. He brought pocketbooks into Jamestown. You know, remember the pocketbooks, Bantam Books and all those ones? He all did all the distributorship of the magazines. And he connected, and we became the distributors to the Chautauqua Institution, which was our moneymaker. So and you worked for your father. He was always firing my brothers. I learned not to get him firing me. But even when I came along, I'd ride with my brothers and get the papers out. And then when I was old enough, I started to do the driving. And I would drive to Westfield in the morning to pick up the New York Central, New York Times, and bring them to Chautauqua, and then go around the lake. And then in the afternoon, I would drive to Youngsville, Pennsylvania, to pick up a station wagon bringing the Pittsburgh papers, the Sun Telly and the Pittsburgh Press. And then I would highball it, as he said, Dad's favorite word, highball to Chautauqua, and then go around the lake. We also, at times, would distribute the Buffalo News, Evening News, the Cleveland papers, but that was our moneymaker. And even in the 50s, they were giving 400 times to the New York Times on a Sunday. And along with that, he becomes part of the Jewish emigration to Jamestown. In about 1918, the Weinstein Company, the father who was very pious with the beard and all, comes as peddlers with his 4 children. The 2 girls were the oldest, and then the 4 sons, Jack Rammstein, Jacob, I don't know if those names are familiar, Jack, Sam, Ezra, and Julius. And the Minskers also came in as Jewish peddlers, and they were competitors, okay? And the Weinsteins got quite successful. Jack was the powerhouse. They had a furniture store called Jamestown Furniture on Main Street. And that was kind of their front. They also developed a web machinery company. And what they would do is find, say, machines out of the mills in New England that were going broke, and they'd go up there and find places to move them to, say, the West Coast or something. And so my dad was friends with them. The Jewish population started to grow. By the 1950s, it was probably the heyday. It was probably Jewish families. That was about it. But the people that came did not come except for an opportunity. So I didn't understand that there could be Jews in other towns that were poor or whatever, but the ones in Jamestown were successful. And they had a men's club. And they would have, after a while, Cy Goldman, that name is familiar, owned the ABC radio station. And between Cy Goldman and a bunch of other names, the men got together and they started this sports dinner. And I was always in the middle of it for some reason, because my dad just, was there. And I watched them bring these people in, which was not easy in those days because of the snow. It was always the first Monday in February. And they brought in great, Johnny Unitas came in, Bracky Marciano. They had great names. And that was very big for Jamestown. It was big for the community, for the Jewish-Christian relationship. A ticket was $8 if you went and just had a dinner in the long tables, but if you wanted to spend $25, you could rub shoulders and have a cocktail party with all the guests. In 1956, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz had their movie, Forever Darling. They decided to do the premiere in Jamestown, and it was on the 6th of February, but the 5th was the sports dinner. So that was that was the height of Jamestown. Jamestown was the furniture capital of the United States, art metal, Union National, I know it was Union National, Jamestown Lounge, Jamestown Royal, Crescent Wrenches, Marlin Rockwell. This city was booming. Their own phone company, their own electric company. The streets were plowed by horses from the farm with the bells. And Jamestown just thrived in those days. So Lucy and Desi came in. The school was let out. They came by helicopter to the playing field of the high school. They had this parade, wet, rainy, snowy, slushy. And that night they had the sports dinner. And I can remember being home and them communicating with Desi and Lucy Productions to organize this. And I was in the room where it happened, just watching these guys do all that. And Dad also got S.O. Shapiro to cover the whole show with Look Magazine. And so Look Magazine covered that whole Lucy's visit, and I think April came out with that story. I took a picture of Desi at the sports dinner. He was in between two rooms, and I took a picture, and Glen Ray Photo had a contest, and I entered this picture. And of course, it was Lucy's picture won, but I think mine was better. But it was Desi. And I won second prize. I got a little brownie camera. And I sent it to Desi, and he signed it and sent it back to me. And I made a little scrap. I had the stub from the show, and they blew it up, and he signed it, best wishes. And I didn't know what to do with this scrapbook. I had it for years. My wife, Karen, said, why don't you donate it to the Lucy Desi Museum? Which I did about 20 years ago. Came back about 10 years ago, and they didn't know what I was talking about. Came back last year, and not only have they found it, but they're going to do a feature this year of the 70th anniversary of that movie. And my little booklet is now behind glass, and it's the center of this whole show. And I've been asked to come back, and I will. We'll come back, and I don't know what I have to do, but this 13-year-old kid is now just turned 84.
That's a great story. Let me go back just a little bit, then we'll go forward.
No, okay.
Tom Hyde.
Frank Hyde?
Tom Hyde, who's the son of
Frank Hyde,
wrote a monograph about the history of the sports dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Not published, not completed. And when the sports editor gets here, you and I are going to convince him to finish it.
Okay.
That's what our job is, Alan. We have a sales job. We've got a sales job. So I'm telling you that outside of him being here. Anyways, he wrote that in 1950, the men's club of, so you would have been 8, Temple Hesed Abraham, met once a week in winter for bowling at Pine Street Lanes, and once a week for summer for golf at Chautauqua Golf Club. And often would drive to big fights in Madison Square Garden and so on. And that the Temple Hesed was growing. It now had over 100 families, and as a result, it fell upon the men's club of the Temple Hesed Abraham to raise money for the expansion of the synagogue. And then, so they started talking among themselves as to what to do. And this is where I'd like you, if you have any memory of these people, Sam Siegel.
Sam Siegel, I was just going to bring that name up. Sam Siegel, his brother was a doctor. Sam was a character, big guy. The brother is buried, they're both all buried in this cemetery, by the way. And I do visit occasionally the Jewish cemetery, and what's so interesting, there is 200 graves there, and I can tell you about 180 of them, because my father had a thought and a comment about each one. And some of them I can't repeat on this, which is very funny. But it was an interesting community. It's funny, one of the Weinstein children married one of the Fine's brother-in-laws, and that was the big wedding. And then they had a divorce. And then there were two sides. Which side are you going to be on in this small little temple?
Wow.
Okay. But yeah, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I just asked
Sam Siegel was, yeah,
they talk about him just as a car dealer and a passionate boxing fan. Suggested to raise money, maybe they should organize and have a dinner. He should just kind of threw it.
Yeah.
So he was given credit in this little monogram.
And that makes sense.
Yeah. And a little bit more about Sam Siegel?
He scared me a little bit because he was big
Yeah.
guy, seemed his character. He almost like a Damon Runyon character in a way. But I think he was the energy and the force behind all this. And he was always, I think some years he was master of ceremony. My dad was master of ceremony when Lucy and Desi came in. But Sam was often there. You had Cy Goldman, who owned the radio station, and through that he got ABC, Howard Cosell, Mel Allen, because they were ABC sportscasters. So they would come. What's so interesting, even if the snow was terrible, the thing went on and they always brought the people in.
Talk about bringing people in, because I'm a few years younger, not much younger than you, but I remember a lot of what you just said. I'm excited about this.
Mm-hmm.
You're triggering a lot of stuff. But one of the things that I remember is that, of course, it was designed, the sports dinner, they decided had to struggle with when to have it, and they always had it after the Hickok sports dinner.
That's correct, because they get a better name. Hickok was then in Rochester, wasn't it?
Right, correct.
That's right. My memory is better than I thought. And so that was probably one reason why they came up with that date, because it would be easier, but still getting them in from Buffalo, and some would fly into Buffalo, but they somehow got them all here. And it didn't cost a lot. I think it was like $600 per person, which it was more money then and today than that, but today you couldn't get those guys in for $20,000. So it didn't cost them a lot. They made money on it. They got all new benches for the temple. But I don't think they really did it for the money. I think they did it because these were all Jewish guys that wished they could have been football players. And, I mean, every time someone made a touchdown, my father would go, "He's Jewish, he's Jewish." Because, you're supposed to be a little bit go hater and become a doctor or a lawyer. And so I think this was these guys were men, but they were never allowed to be part of the manly scene. So this gave them power and wonder. And it was fun to watch. And for a little kid, like a little skinny little kid, watch this. It was almost scary at times.
Well, that testosterone kicked in.
Oh my God, yes. And Trump would be happy about that, wouldn't he? Or Hegspeth, I guess, who wants everyone to have testosterone.
But it seemed like the players early on, from the programs we looked at, Sam Siegel, and then there was Cy, who seemed to be the talent guy.
Yes.
Because of all his connectiveness.
Right.
And then there's Harry Peck, a guy.
My father, who liked a guy from Syracuse who was Carmen Basilio's manager.
Norm Rothschild.
North Rothschild.
Right.
And Dad liked Roth, and Roth liked Dad, so that's always why Carmen Basilio came in.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I think they even stayed at our house, at least Norm did.
Yeah.
Dad liked Norm. So,
Well,
that was his macho part.
And again, I'm going to digress myself, but I love to watch boxing. So they brought all this boxing celebrities.
Yes.
So it was principally baseball, football, boxing.
And also they had the Jamestown football player.
McCusker.
McCusker, Jim was there. I guess he had already was playing for the Pittsburgh
Right.
Peck, yeah, he was there. And then they have a whole list of people every year.
Yeah.
My mother's brother was a character, a little guy with talked too much, would go to the sports dinner and shake hand and tell people, I'm so-and-so. He'd tell people,
Your
mother's brother, named Herman. Herman.
And, oh, he lived here?
No, he lived in Queens, New York, but they would come up and then he'd go through and try to impress young kids how he was a character.
Well, I'm going to read from the monograph again because it ties into your dad. There was an event at the Hickok Sports Dinner where they gave a belt worth $10,000. And it said typically members of the men's club would attend the dinner, then drive athletes from Jamestown for their dinner the following night. One night, as the Hickok dinner was drawing to a close, the men from Jamestown were in the parking lot warming their cars for the drive south. By now, the New York State Thruway was in place, so the drive was reduced from 4 hours to 3. They were waiting in the parking lot for the likes of Dick Grove, Leroy Kelly, to make sure they had a ride to get there. Suddenly, there was the comedian Henny Youngman, a special guest of the Hickok committee, standing outside in the cold, looking lost. Youngman called out, "Hey, where you guys going?" "To another dinner," he was told. "Can I come too?" he asked. One of the men waved him over, and after a little sorting of space, Youngman hopped into the back of the car driven by Harry Peck, a newspaper and magazine distributor, and that year's chairman of the All Sports Dinner. It was only they were on the road for a while, and at some point south of Buffalo, that Youngman piped up and say, "Hey, where's Jamestown?" Next night, he was on, I'm going to continue this because this ties into me. He goes, "Hey, next night on stage at the Crystal Ballroom in front of another sellout crowd of 750 surprised guests, the unannounced Henny Youngman stole the show. Before the dinner, he turned to a camera-toting 12-year-old named Greg Peterson and said, 'Hey, kid, bring the camera over here.' Youngman took the boy aside, where after obtaining a spare pillowcase from one of the hotel staff, he made a turban, took his violin out of his case, posed for what Youngman told the boy was a publicity shot. Later on, it was a Polaroid. It developed, and I got him to sign the back of it, and I've got that someplace."
And we have a picture I brought of my father and Henny Youngman.
Yep.
And that was a different year. That wasn't 56.
No. This was in the 60s.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
So that all happened 1960. I don't know when it was, but mid-60s because I was then around. So it's, you and I you don't realize it, but we're connected. But for Harry bringing Henny there, I wouldn't have had that one experience.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And actually, it all occurred. Henny took me upstairs into the hotel room, and because I had a camera. I didn't tell my dad where I was. I'm a 12-year-old. And
So we're both similar.
And my dad goes, when I came back down, I said, "Where you been?" "I've been with Henny Youngman." "What have you been doing?" "Well, he put on his turban. Here's the pictures." He goes, like now he's concerned. Like, what the hell are you doing
with this guy?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So I never thought of it. Nobody ever thought of it until he really.
Yeah.
So that was the Henny Youngman story. Do you have memories of you and some of the athletes who attended? Did any of them sort of pay special attention to you, Alan, as Harry's?
I probably, if they did, I don't remember. But it was just, the whole thing was just almost overwhelming. My dad needed to have something. He was self-made, lost a lot, made this business work on newspaper, on 1/2 cent and 3 cents and 4 cent newspaper, put 3 kids through college and graduate school. And I'm just trying to, some other thought, but he, I don't recall, but he probably stole the show in a way. And I just sat there just kind of overwhelmed. I don't recall any of them, but I do have a picture of myself, my brother and my father, and Jackie Robinson. And I think I have that camera around my neck that I took the picture of Desi. And I'll send you a snapshot of that picture.
Well, it's interesting because that's 56. You would have been all of
13 and a half.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's been downhill. I was valedictorian in my senior high school class, but and I had the lead in the senior class play, but it's been downhill ever since.
I don't think so. At least my program says the national anthem sung by Lou Russo.
Yes, I remember that.
and then an invocation by the guy who was there seemingly forever, Rabbi Julius Kerman.
Kerman was an elderly man who came to Jamestown. One of the problems with our temple and our whole Jewish upbringing was half the time we couldn't get a rabbi. So either you didn't have a rabbi or you got someone like Kerman who was very old, and he came to Jamestown because his son was a rabbi in Buffalo. So he was a rabbi at the end of the series. When I came through, a Rabbi Schwartzman, a young man from Canada, was the rabbi. He was so orthodox he couldn't survive. He needed kosher food, and they would bring kosher food in by the. My parents once were kosher. Most older Jews were, but they'd bring them in on the Greyhound bus, and often the meat was spoiled by the time it got to Jamestown. So they stopped being kosher, and that rabbi left. But he tutored me, and I had a heck of a bar mitzvah with him. I mean, he wasn't messing around. There weren't many children of the Jewish families, and so having a bar mitzvah boy, you felt kind of important, probably too important, if you know what I mean.
Well, because I'm always looking, the one constant through all the years that I have programs was there would always be, like I say, the invocation by Rabbi Kerman, opening address from the president of the men's club, who could be a lot of different people. Mill Power.
Mill Power was an eye doctor who was buried here in Jamestown.
Harry Klein.
Who my father, yes, Harry Klein, who my father made some comments about, which I won't repeat.
I knew Harry.
Was he a character?
Oh, yes, all of that.
See, he had a character with a character.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of.
Yeah, and Harry was kind of a small guy.
Yeah, but he has a World War II history on his tombstone. I never knew that. Did you know that?
I did not. I'll ask. It's funny. I know his son, but.
Yeah, ask about that, because I was going to tell Dad, you're making fun of Harry, and he was a World War II vet. You avoided that.
Well, but the constant was chairman of the sports center, introduction was always Harry Peck as the president. Now, he seemingly was the president of the club, or the chairman of the sports dinner.
He was chairman because you just let him be chairman.
Oh, is that right?
And he had a ton of energy. He grew up with all that history, and in many ways, I almost think he was traumatized by that history that he had. When he got to Jamestown, I was born in '42, remember, and his mother, who he was very tight with, was dying in '45. The Jewish population was being mauled in Europe, and I think all that, and they were going to rent a house on Chestnut Street. And the woman said to my mother, and I was told this story, I hope you're not like the last tenants. They were filthy and they were Jews. And my mother said, then we can't be here. Oh no, she apologized, she made bread, she made everything. But from that time on, my parents decided we have to show Jamestown that Jews are normal. So in my bar mitzvah, at 13, we had 350 people there. 50 were Jewish and 300 weren't. And Judge Bodine, that was always my father's friend. He always came to our Passover Seders. So Dad made it important that we get together. Also, Dad would always go up to WJTN, and I'd come home in school and the radio, Harry Peck just walked in. Hey, Harry, what's up? And he just did. So I got a little of his juice, hopefully not too much.
Well, your dad was Empire News.
Empire, but that became Peck News Company.
Peck News, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I remember.
Well, it was a chain. It wasn't Empire was the local name, but it was really American News Company was a chain, and they had the Disney comic books. We had the Superman comic books, and apparently there was almost some competition. So if we went away, I could buy a Donald Duck comic book if we were away, but I was not allowed to buy one. And then eventually they went out, Empire went out, and they took over that. He got his new building, which is still down the hill next to the old Loblaw building, which was a shoe store for a while. Now it's vacant. B.F. Goodrich was in top, and that building is down the hill. The problem with that is in the winter, getting the trucks up was an interesting job. But so that's where his business was. You know, last Monday, I went to buy a newspaper at the bookstore in Chautauqua, and there was no papers, and the sign was, There will be no papers here on Mondays or around the lake because they can't get a driver. And I'm thinking, for 25 years we serviced everyone. You wouldn't have seen that with Harry Peck. And the funniest thing is, Randall Woodrig, who ran the bookstore, I think was a little jealous of my father because he worked for Chautauqua. And I guess he thought because my dad had trucks, he's very wealthy. So there was always a tension between them. They didn't like each other. And Dad left in 1970. There is a rock in front of the bookstore with a plate honoring Randall Woodrig, who died in 71. If my dad saw that, he would probably, he'd have a fit. That was funny. Yeah.
Well, you're talking more about your dad as we because that's my memory of your dad always giving the speech just before the show began. So there would be, ladies and gentlemen, Harry Peck. And in one sense, we wanted to kind of get to the speakers.
Yeah.
I mean, so he's the last guy standing. And sometimes, I got to tell you this one story, and you'll laugh, only because I've never seen it before in all my years.
Yeah.
I'm an attorney, and I've seen a lot of stuff. But Harry, it was one of those nights where, of course, everybody's smoking cigars, and your eyes.
His teeth were flat from all the cigars he smoked.
Yeah. And your eyes were just watering.
Yeah.
And I was just a kid, more or less. But Harry got up there and was pontificating for a period of time.
Oh, really?
I'm trying to be nice. And all of a sudden, in the back of the room, I'd never seen this happen before, people started standing up
and clapping.
Kept them off the podium. When you hear the term being clapped
yeah,
off the podium,
yeah.
That's the only time I've ever saw that happen, except one time much later in life. But that's an image I have of your dad. Now, he was always in that awkward position of being, and now the chairman of the board.
He loved this. And he also loved Colgate, because all of us went to Colgate whether you wanted to or not. And so Colgate was the fall season. The winter season, he'd get busy with the sports dinner. And then in the spring, he'd start getting ready for the summer season for the newspapers and magazines. So that was him.
I'm going to ask you one other question. I had always heard, and it may be urban legend, that Chautauqua Institution sold more New York Times than per capita than any place in the country.
We delivered in the 50s 400 New York Times every Sunday, and that's what they're still doing today. And of course, at one time Chautauqua had more tracts than any other county. Right. In the turn of the century. So that was the bookstore was very important. I mean, it was important to him, it was important to us, and there were still, Chautauqua was different in the 50s. I remember it as during Dreary. I remember it was all white buildings. You could smell, sometimes the odor was there, and a lot of school teachers with blue hair that didn't tip much, right? And then by the 70s or 80s, that's when it became alive, where it's just magnificent today. My goodness gracious.
You're so perceptive.
Yeah. And it was funny because they don't advertise. In Maryland, where we are, if I mention Chautauqua, no one knows what we're talking about unless they've been there. But they don't advertise like they should. And even the speakers from the Brookings Institute were here all week. And from the AEC, American Enterprise, was there. And all day, every day, they had these two speakers, and all of them said, "We've never been here before. This place is phenomenal. You people should be so proud of what you have. And we're coming back." One guy even said, "I'm looking for real estate here." And that's so people just don't know what Chautauqua offers. And it's one of the last places. I got like an advertisement for them. But they should do somehow better. There are a lot of little ones there. I noticed that a lot of children, babies are there. And elderly, very elderly, but not the middle group you don't see. And they could, I think, do more in somehow sharing with the nation what they have here. It's unique. As a man said today from the New York Times, this is like an 18th century place, and it's almost like the Roman Colosseum. You still have this, it looks like an old building of the 17 or 1800s. How wonderful. So I wish maybe they can get that out a little more.
It's in a sense, it's the best kept secret, and I don't think they want that anymore. I mean, there was a time
they didn't want that. Yeah,
there was a time it was really insular. I was involved with the board and did a lot of stuff for them, and as they were even growing locally, they just said, should we really get the New York Times involved? Should we get the national publications? Should we? Ultimately, they decided yes. But it was a debate.
Well, I can remember in the 50s, if you were Jewish, you laid low. There were signs in the 40s that no Jews or dogs were allowed around the Glenhard. I heard that story. But in the 50s, you went, but you were quiet. Today, the prime speaker on Sunday's Christian service was a young Jewish female cantor who talked about the beauty of Jewish music. And I'm thinking, you would have never heard a whole, and the place was filled. And so there's a Chabad, an ultra-religious. They try to grab me. I don't want to go there. There's the Everett Center. It's just and they have a Friday night service around the bell tower. There's 400 to 500 Jewish people are there. So it's become very ecumenical, and it's nice to see. I just hope it survives. That's my worry.
Back to your dad, Harry. How long did he keep the news distribution business? He kept
the business to 1970 when he sold it to the man who ran the Buffalo, who had that contract in Buffalo. And in 1970, when the Vietnam War came, he couldn't get help. And there was a time he'd have to get in the car and make a delivery. And I can remember once telling him, Dad, we need 2 new tires for the station wagon. Oh, all you ever do is spend my money. So he took my mother on a trip, and he blew a tire. He got 4 tires. And I said, you didn't need 4, you only needed 2. But he realized that he was getting old, and he just couldn't do it anymore. The tragedy was that he went to Florida, and he wanted to still be in business. He got on the road again, distributing the Midnight Magazine, and no one wanted him. And so he had to retire, and that was not a pretty picture. He would go to Vic Tanny's, you know where that is?
Sure.
For 5 or 6 hours a day, and the other days he would jog 7 miles, and if I came to visit, I couldn't keep up with him. And he came down, he used to scratch his ear, and he must have got an infection, and one day he got confused, and he died 2 weeks later of a herpes virus and encephalitis. Okay. But he was so physically strong from all his exercise that his body wouldn't give out, and for days he just kept going.
Yeah.
And my mother, who adored, she used to complain about him. He doesn't do this, he yells too much, he does this. And she never was the same afterwards. And she passed away not too many years later. But that was quite a marriage, from what they came from, particularly. She left school in 12th grade, would walk from the Lower East Side up to 30th Street in Madison Avenue as a secretary, and would bring her money, would walk home to give her father the money. And when I got married, I remember the first thing I did was buy a brass bed. And she came to visit, and I said, look at my bed. And she said, why'd you do that? Why? Because they lived in the tenements, and her job was to shine the brass railing going up the steps. And so for her, that was a bad memory. But we'd go to New York every year because Jamestown was a little too Christian for her. I loved the idea of the big tree and all that. And I ran the Christmas tree sale. How do you like that? But she never took us to the tenement museum. But when she was dying, I did have a tour. I did go. And I saw what they grew up in. There was like 8 families to a bathroom. You slept on the fire escape at night. It wasn't fun, and they deify it, but she had very bad memories of that, so we just didn't talk about it.
I'm reading an article there talking again about your dad. This is July 1st, 1982, Camp Anyasa Craft House to honor Peck. And it talks about your dad as former director of Jamestown YMCA with special interest in Camp Anyasa. And did you used to go to Camp Anyasa?
I might have once. I didn't go there, but they donated. We had a little we never could go away because the summer, so they bought a little cottage in Warner Bay. They wanted to buy one in Cheney's Point, but it wasn't for sale because it was Jewish, and there were no Jews on the lake then. So a man who was pretty well-to-do had a big warehouse and a little tiny house on Warner Bay, which is small. It was mostly blue collar. We got there. And we got a 17-foot Chris Craft mahogany runabout boat, which was more fun. I still have wonderful memories of that. They donated it to the Y camp when he died. And 2 years later, we came back to, he died, and then we had a service. It wasn't there anymore. Disappeared. But he loved the kids, and he was active in the Y. And he gave some money to the Y.
He was also active in the Kiwanis Club. Do you remember?
Not only was he so active in the Kiwanis Club, but if we traveled and it was a Thursday, we had to go to whatever Kiwanis Club it was in that town.
Funny how they work that way. You get credit.
Is that what it was?
That's what happened. You get credit for showing up, because if you weren't out,
And
they kept attendance every week. You had to be.
Yeah. And the Jamestown Shrine Club, for some reason, maybe whatever, he was never able to be connected to them, so he came out of either Chicago or Columbus as a Shriner. But they authorized me to become a Mason when I was in college, and whether I wanted to be one or not. So either you liked Dad or you didn't. But those that liked him really liked him, because he was a character. And he could never get home in time to take me anywhere, but when it came time for one of his friends in the Shrine Club who had cancer, he'd take him up to Buffalo for treatment. If the kids would come, the paper boys would come in, he'd take them back there and load them up with all the comic books they wanted. He hired not necessarily the most sophisticated of people, but if there was a problem, he would always make sure they had money. So he was a caretaker.
So I'm looking at this Temple Hesed Abraham Men's Club's 17th Annual Sports Dinner letterhead. And I'm going to ask you if you have comments on some of these guys, because these are people, again, I'm a kid, but I remember Sam Lasser.
Sam Lasser his wife Sally's family owned a very powerful accounting company in Manhattan. And Sam and they put a branch here, and Sam came and was the head of that accounting department.
Seidman and Seidman?
Yes, that was it. I think it was in the Carnahan building, wasn't it? I think. And Sam and Sally used to always yell at each other. I can remember that.
Well, we got to know very well Miles.
Yeah, with a tragedy with Miles. Remember what happened? Miles, they had a 2-year-old, and apparently the child was killed. That was a bad memory. Miles backed up, the kid was behind the car, and he's buried with them.
Yeah, it's awful. We talked about Harry already. Jack Feiner.
Feiner, I don't remember that name.
Of course, we talked about Cy Goldman, but your dad was general chairman, Harry Peck, 1968, and I think that was his last year.
I think so. You began to feel it was ending. When was the last one? Was it did they go up to 72, or they ended in
76?
Oh, really? Yeah. But the real biggies were in the.
Oh, yeah. Do you remember your dad talking about sort of? I don't know, the less attendance, the higher cost, all that. Do you remember him kind of talk about the demise, seeing the end?
I do not remember that. And if he had said it, I probably would remember. Because one thing that Dad, he lived a long time because he never kept anything in. His emotions were always on his sleeve. I don't remember that. But that obviously they must have had meetings over that, whether to keep going or not.
Right.
But the sports people were getting smarter, weren't they? They wanted more than 600 hours. It was almost to bring someone in now. If you brought anyone in, it'd be 20,000, 10,000, or whatever. The money is crazy in sports now, isn't it? I think, but everywhere.
It's insane. Because I personally have a memory starting in 1960 and really running for about 12 years, as my dad would always give me my birthday present, which was January, and the birthday present was the $25.
Oh, the sponsor. You were a sponsor. Yeah, that's how I got the picture of Desi.
And with Henny Youngman and all that stuff. So that was cheap thrills for me, and an autograph book, and that, golly.
It was wonderful. Yeah. Jamestown was wonderful. I miss it.
Yeah. Well,
I think we all do, in a way.
Let's talk a little bit about you, Alan. I know you ended up as a physician in Baltimore.
No, what happened, I went to medical school, whether I should have or not. We had 2 lawyers and a doctor. And I went to Buffalo, got accepted. I went to Colgate, graduated with honors in biology, and was accepted in the University of Buffalo, and I went 4 years there, graduated in '64, was attracted to psychiatry, which I didn't understand why, but I just liked it. And I found that the head of medicine was from Harvard, and he was more interested in this disease and that disease, and I was more interested in the people. I watched my father like a hawk. I wrote a book about my father when I was 8. I wrote a 2-page report. I'm proud of him. And I talked about him. So I was always studying him about this character. I don't think I've ever met anyone still quite like him. He could read into you, and if you like Harry Klein, for some reason didn't like Harry Klein. And so I was always more fascinated by the people who were sick than all the guts and all that didn't. So I had a female psychiatrist there named Jimmy Holland, who I really liked. And I remember in the first year of summer, I was going to do a fat study with her. Her husband was the big shot head of the medicine from the Harvard guy. But he apparently had a horse run over him, and so she couldn't be there to take care of me, so she had to attend to him in his recovery. So I followed the residents around in psychiatry for the whole summer and became fascinated by these characters coming in, what they were going through, and I just became fascinated by these people and what made them depressed. Some people were hearing voices, and so I kept trying to be a real doctor, but kept getting attracted to the psychiatry. And I graduated medical school with honors only in psychiatry. I had the lowest grades in surgery. I learned at Buffalo the surgery was so nasty, they're always nasty, that the best way to get a mark in surgery is do the bloods and leave for the day. So, but I did do well in psychiatry and became an intern at DC General Hospital in Washington. Got there a few days before and to look for an apartment, and it came the day after Martin Luther King was shot. And I became an intern that year, and Washington, D.C. was hot. Remember, it burned? And it was an interesting time. I saw an earthy side of Washington that I had never seen before. Got a deferment because the government was in Washington. I got a deferment in the public health service, so I wouldn't have to go to Vietnam, but I could finish my training, got a deferment, and had to find a place to work, and I decided it would be the federal department of the federal penitentiaries. And I thought by that time, gee, my father was a character, I'd like to learn more about this. So they said, okay, you can have a residency in psychiatry, then you got to work at the Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary.
Wow.
So I was an intern, so I became a psych resident at the University of Maryland, and in those days, it was run by the analysts. And on my floor was a patient they'd be brought in, I'll still remember him, nice place you got here. He was bipolar, and he spent the whole year next to my office. And I could watch him for the whole year, and I had an analyst come in twice a week for an hour to lecture me and question me about this person. At times I wish he wouldn't show it because I couldn't give him the answer. But he was trained by Frieda Fromm-Reichmann, and she was trained by Sigmund Freud.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't appreciate it at the time, but we, in those days, didn't have many medicines. We had to understand dynamics, so I became a therapist and also a psychiatrist. Then I had to do my deferment, and by this time I had learned a lot about myself, and the last thing I wanted to be around was violent men, and guess where my deferment was? The Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary. And I thought I'd be in the front with the warden. You know, they bring them in chains to me. I was in the bowels of the prison. So every day I went to work, you had to go through the red top and walk through the entire population to your office. And it was scary. And they're all walking around. I didn't expect that. There was a psych wing, which I trained inmates to run, partly because I found myself in the prison. I was almost feeling claustrophobic. So I had inmates take care of inmates, and they loved it. And that's what happened. Towards the end of that stay, I one day came to work, and there was like a room you'd walk down, like a hallway with a long bench, and then you have the gated door to the hospital. I had the key. No, I didn't have the key to that. A guard was there, and one day towards the end of my stay, I'm walking down, instead of being 4 or 5 people for sick talk, because it was also for the doctors, the other doctors too. I was a psychiatrist, and I just saw the troubled ones. And suddenly there's 300 guys all in that area, and they're all jumping all over you, Dr. Peck, Dr. Peck, and I didn't know what the hell was going on about that. So I started working with industry, like the prison. I started seeing people who were traumatized. I saw over 500 black female bus drivers in the city of Baltimore who had been raped or attacked or held up or beaten up. And my practice became more of a trauma practice, and I probably had the largest trauma practice in the country. So I'm seeing 5 to 6 new people. There was a fire, cops would shoot someone, the person who shot might be a patient, or the cop might become a patient. And that's when I got a good skill in working with civilian post-traumatic stress disorder. And my practice was half that and half private practice. Towards the end, that didn't work out so well, and the lawyers were tough to work with. And so we thought it'd take a nice job on the eastern shore of Maryland, which didn't really work out. I saw psychiatry deteriorate. Worked at a few different clinics, still had a small private practice, but I've been doing disability evaluations for the last 5 years. And what I've done is taken my knowledge of the early years of my training with the analyst who taught me how to do diagnosis, how to do treatment. Today you have clinics, managed care. You see a patient for 5 minutes, you don't see him for a month. I was trained in a different way. So what I've been able to do with my reports is the person that say was raised in the projects of Baltimore, beaten up, no father, traumatized, no mother, and then by the time they are in teenagers' years, they've been loaded with trauma, so they're in the street, violence, using, selling. And I learned a lot. I learned that those early years are everything. That if you have a good childhood that's superb and you have the picket fence, you'll do well. But if you've been traumatized, that part of your brain is overwhelmed. And these guys then wind up getting in the street, too many babies. And then they lose their driver's license, so they can't do child support. So then they use drugs, sell drugs, and usually wind up going to prison, often for years. And so I've been doing some of that work, kind of a continuum of what I've learned, and I try to have them understand what they've been through. But all of these people in prison, I'm sorry I didn't know that at the time when I was there, that they all came from trauma. Right. We have an emotional brain. It hardwires about 11 or 12, and then the rational brain should take over, go to college, do well. But if that emotional brain's been traumatized, particularly sexual abuse, then that emotional brain runs the show. So a woman says to me, I'm never going to marry a violent alcoholic like my father, I say, yes, you will, because that's what you know. So that's what I've been doing recently, and I'm still doing it.
God bless you. And here you are at Chautauqua.
Yep.
You come up here for a couple weeks?
We come, well, this time was 2 weeks, and I'm glad, because we used to come up for a week. And, and of course, we had the Harry concert Friday night. I couldn't have gone home the next day. So we come for 2 weeks. We've for a while, we're sharing Chautauqua or the Berkshires, Tanglewood, up in western Massachusetts, and now we do both.
Yeah, fantastic.
We come up here, and I love the Boston Symphony and what goes on up there. And I go to Jamaica in the winter. That's my life.
As we kind of draw in closure, Alan, I want to read this editorial that you made a copy of, which ties in everything. This is an editorial February 2nd, 1968. The Men's Club of Temple Hesed Abraham has wrapped up its 17th annual sports dinner amid the fun and fanfare that have been a hallmark of this event each year. General Chairman Harry Peck and his aides, however, have established a simple format to contend with the factors of some of just 1952. I'm summarizing. Of the loss of some things, and they continue to have success. One is the selectiveness in booking the major performers of the year and striving for a panel of new faces annually. Speakers are urged to keep it short and light. We want everyone to have fun. As a result, the men's club dinner has gained steadily in stature, not only locally, but all over the banquet circuit. In fact, Johnny Unitas said, "Believe me, I attend a lot of them, and this is one of the best I have attended." And he went on to say in the editorial that over its 17 years, that over 10,000 people have attended the sports dinner. And of course, it's a who's who of people who've attended. We congratulate the men's club for continuing a job well done. And the general chairman through most of all those years was
Harry Peck.
Harry Peck.
We lived through it too, living with Harry Peck. But I was in the room when they're calling Desi Lou, getting that all arranged, and it was so interesting just being there, watching these people. It was a memory that I have. And a memory of Jamestown too, and just see what's happened. It's almost sad. But that's a small town for you anyway. Now, we live on the Eastern Shore. There, a lot of people are retiring there, so there's Easton, Maryland. They're seeing people moving to there, and there's actually a new little temple there. But this temple was closed down. My parents would have rolled over in the grave. They had holy rollers running it for a while, which I found kind of humorous, because it was an interesting time, and of course the Holocaust and all that history was also in these people's minds, and the fact that they could connect. And it was hard for me because I liked Jamestown, I liked the Italian dudes, I liked the Swedish people, and when I got around the big city, they didn't understand that. So I've almost at times always thought of Chautauqua, even when we moved and we were sitting near the Chesapeake Bay, but I used to call it Chautauqua East. And there was a boat there, a big, I remember a Chris Crab with the word Chautauqua on it.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Alan, what's the question I should be asking you that I haven't?
Well, what I've learned is the early years play a big role in all of our lives. And as we get older, they say when you have Alzheimer's, you can't remember what you had yesterday, but you can still remember the past. And for us, the past is more than I thought. Like we were at Bemis Point having lunch at a very expensive place, by the way, and around the beach. That used to be Webb's. It's a store. We would deliver newspapers there, and there's still the lighthouse and still Wagon Wheels, which I still delivered newspapers to. And I remember looking the land across the water there, and I say, gee, when I take my boat, I have this old boat, we don't do much anymore, but when I come out of Oxford, Maryland, we come by and I see that it reminded me that's what I saw in Chautauqua, in Lake Chautauqua. So it really did mold my mind. Also the kindness that I saw in Jamestown. Even though the Italians and the Swedes were different in their personality, they were all both decent, interesting people. And I haven't seen that, in a way, in the world I've been in. Of course, it's been a tough world with ex-cons and people like that. But even the aggression I saw as an intern or in the hospital situation, and I keep remembering how sweet it was in Jamestown.
So this has been great. Thank you, Alan.
My pleasure, really.
You're really good, Alan.